Hi, I am Professor Amitabh Banerjee. I am an epidemiologist who had served for almost 3 decades in the armed forces, and then I am in academics for the past 2 decades. And as I had been mentioning, I had been chronicling the events of the pandemic as they unfolded and writing columns in newspapers and a collection of my columns in National Herald I have published as COVID-19 Third Eye, and which I have carried out a book reading of those columns, which have been compiled in this Third Eye, and it is uploaded in my YouTube channel. And ebooks also are available. So I am also, after I have finished the book reading, as you know, of COVID-19 Third Eye, I have started narrating and giving commentary on other columns also, which has not been included in the book. But they have great relevance as for understanding the dynamics of the pandemic and also to anticipate future pandemics and the different stakeholders, different people with different perspective. We and the most importantly, the common person, the citizens of the world, they to understand so that there is no panic and chaos like we had in the past pandemic. So the column which I want to narrate today was published on 26th February 2023, almost after the pandemic was over, in National Herald. And the title of the column was COVID-19 pandemic as imagined by armchair generals and amateur docs. Wars and pandemics are serious business, best left to professionals who are trained for deliberations and slow thinking. So this is what is happening both in war and in pandemics. Both are being glorified, both are being simplified, and the actual professionals, whether in war or in pandemic, they are in the background. Their voice is not heard, and this is how uh, I have started that wars and pandemics are serious business and they require the professional involvement rather than armchair generals and armchair epidemiologists. Wars are often glorified with the media and the movies nowadays. Wars are often glorified, glossing over the blunders committed by those who control the narrative. And there is also a saying that the winner writes the history. These sanitized versions of war tend to be picked up by mass media and movie moguls, creating and perpetuating myths. However, ancient as well as recent history confirms there are no victors in war. Ashoka was seized with remorse and anguish on witnessing the death and devastation his victory in the Kalinga war had caused. In the Mahabharata, the Pandavas experienced similar despair after winning the war against the Kauravas when they saw the field of glory turn into a field of the dead and dying. Recent military history also confirms the futility of war, be it the Vietnam War, the Iran-Iraq War, Afghanistan imbroglio, or more recently the Russian-Ukraine war. And now we can also add the Israel-Palestinian war also. Peace is the dream of the wise, while war is the history of mankind. James Dunnigan, a military political analyst and author of How to Make War, stated the obvious when he said that real warfare is ugly, destructive, and remembered fondly only by those who survive without getting too close. Indeed, no battle plan survives the first few seconds of actual combat. They are now making battle plan for the next pandemic also, pandemic TT and all that. So even in war also, within the first few seconds, no plan because the dynamics keep changing very fast. The glory of war hyped by media and movie moguls, spilled over in the fight against pandemics. Doctors are glorified as warriors, inverted commas, who have a pill for every ill, like soldiers ready with ammunition. In both war and in health emergencies, several stakeholders have their skin in the game. As I said, the new pandemic alarm. Also, there are many people with their skin in the game, many stakeholders. This is evident in the pharma race, seemingly overtaking the arms race. The pharma race is overtaking the arms race. No wonder war movies are giving way to thrillers around pandemics. We also had a recent vaccine war. But while war movies follow the event or actual war, creative liberties have enabled filmmakers to allow fiction to precede fact. Movies are made first, and then from the movies, I think people take the cue and behave, they follow the script of the movie. The best example is the medical thriller Contagion. The movie was released on 9 September 2011, the date on which 9/11 also rings up the Twin Towers of New York collapsing. Both the events, one real, that is the movie was real, Contagion. No, sorry, the Twin Tower event was real and the movie was virtual, were designed to stoke public panic. Both spoke public panic. The film dealt with the spread of a virus transmitted when sick individuals trust surfaces, leaving the virus behind for others to pick up, an eerie similarity with the early days of the myths of the present coronavirus pandemic. You all remember, don't touch anything, don't touch, don't even open the newspaper stop. So probably people were already psyched by the movie Contagion to behave in real world also. In the movie, the virus originated from bats in the forest of China. Ah, see the similarity. The virus infected a pig, which was slaughtered, and the chef who prepared it shook hands with a guest who became the first victim. While the origins of COVID-19 are still not certain knowledge, this column was written, but now the evidence is point towards the lab, but still not certain. Bats around Wuhan's wet markets were the initial suspect. So the from the Contagion movie, the attention shifted towards bats in real pandemic also. In the film, transmission was amplified by people touching their face several times after touching door handles, elevator buttons, and other surfaces. Post-pandemic guidelines in 2020, in an unmistakable resemblance, instructed people not to touch their faces and sanitize doorknobs, lift buttons, and enter premises. We have all faced this in the pandemic, as if the fiction came first and then the pandemic. It is sometimes difficult to tell fact from fiction. Fiction seems to have hijacked science and sensibility. The contagion actors were drafted to persuade people during the COVID-19 pandemic to follow COVID appropriate behavior like frequent hand washing and social distancing. Isolation. The mortality rate in the virus in the movie was 25%. In the movie, 25% to 30%. An early paper in the Lancet also estimated mortality of the COVID-19 virus to be as high as 20%. It appears that scientists were also taking the cues from the movies. Of course, this 20% was from the nursing homes and old age homes in Italy, average age 80 years. So and some Lancet paper estimated it maybe 20%. It was highly inflated. Ultimately, we found it is less than 0.1%, 0.05% up to 70 years. The impact of social media and misinformation has also been scripted in the film Contagion. A character in the movie narrates on social media about his recovery with an alternative remedy. This attracted 12 million followers and a heavy fine for the false claim. Another compelling similarity is the race for the vaccine to avert existential threat. Both in the film and real life, vaccine development broke all records and was ready within 12 months. What similarity? I mean, this movie came a decade earlier and became best box office hits and all over the world, and people when the pandemic alarm was given, everybody went undercover like as the movie is real, and so many similarities, you see. And then the alternative therapy also was given. Yes, censorship was done in the movie, misinformation about the and alternative remedy was discouraged in the movie. So in real life also, if you remember, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, they were discouraged. Fiction confined to films and books is indeed harmless, but when it starts influencing actual decision making, it raises eyebrows. Simulating imaginary situations, but real life response to health emergencies can also be unsettling. Simulation, imaginary situations, but with some experts finding the exercise outrageously stupid while others smell a hidden agenda. So, film is one thing with side. Now there are contingency plans, and there was such a plan, and now again they are making a pandemic treaty, envisaging that the next pandemic is going to be much more severe, many times severe than COVID. So let us come to the first plan, which was made before the pandemic. Simulation exercise rather than plan. One such exercise was Event 201, conducted in October 2019, just a couple of months before the pandemic, just a few months before the real pandemic hit us. This was hosted and supervised by philanthropist and amateur Dr. Bill Gates, specifically for biosecurity functionaries associated with government and non-government agencies. The war game consisted of 4 tabletop simulations of a worldwide coronavirus pandemic. Participants included high-ranking members from the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, Bloomberg, Johns Hopkins University Population Center, the CDC, various media houses, the Chinese government, a former CIA director, vaccine makers, finance and biosecurity industry, and the president of Edelman, the world's leading PR firm. Event 201 was touted as a drill for governments in waiting. The participants would orchestrate the pandemic response discussed at the drill barely a few months earlier. The participants at the drill role played members of a pandemic control council, wargaming a contagion. Drills included an array of psychological warfare techniques for pushing the official narrative, censoring dissents, besides mask and vaccine mandates. Exactly the script was simulated, and exactly the same steps were rolled out in the pandemic. You see, it planned extending government's authoritarian powers, extending draconian lockdowns, suspension of individual rights of assembly, free speech, and fear mongering to ensure mass compliance. This was Event 201, a war game, a pandemic game, or a simulation exercise 2 months before the pandemic, and exactly the same things followed. And now also we have got the pandemic treaty looming over our head, and all these provisions are in the pandemic treaty and amendments to the international health regulations. That is extending government's authoritarian powers, extending draconian lockdowns, suspension of individual rights of assembly, free speech, censorship, and fear mongering to ensure compliance, mass compliance. So we are now, it is going to be ratified by the pandemic treaty. Strangely, Gates later denied that event 201 took place. Bill Gates denied it. In a statement to the BBC, he said, now here we are, we didn't simulate this, we didn't practice this. So in both health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory. This denial is hard to swallow as videos of the event are available. I'll see if I can put the links. And I will be putting the link to the column which I have written. The denial actually fueled suspicion around Event 201 and led to conspiracy theories. Some of these conspiracy theories suggested that the organizers of the event had prior knowledge of the COVID-19 virus, and the ensuing pandemic a few months later was not a coincidence. The pandemic, according to some of these conspiracy theorists, was engineered to enable vaccine manufacturers to reap windfall profit. These extreme views are indeed rebutted by organizers and Gates himself. They maintained that such drills were routine and part of training of decision makers for emergencies and disaster contingency plans. The Reuters fact check team also questioned John Hopkins on event 201 and asked if the event had ended up predicting the pandemic. In response, the John Hopkins Center gave an assurance that the mock scenario was only a drill to test preparedness and response challenges following a real pandemic. They claimed that for the exercise, they had modeled a fictional coronavirus pandemic and claimed they were not aware that a real pandemic was just around the corner. Lot of coincidences from the beginning of the pandemic. After the vaccine rollout, there are also a lot of coincidences. Even as we may have to rewrite the probability theory. Even as the dust was yet to settle on controversies around Event 201 and the pandemic that followed, another tabletop exercise named Catastrophic Contagion was conducted on 23 October 2022 in Brussels, Belgium. This time, the participants included 10 current and former health ministers and public health officials from Senegal, Rwanda, Nigeria, Angola, Liberia, Singapore, India, Germany, and guess who? Bill Gates, co-chair of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This tabletop exercise simulated an even more severe pandemic. I think next is about to come with far higher fatality than the COVID-19. You see the parroting of the experts. They are following this script only. First was the event 201, now catastrophic contagion. There it predicted, and everybody is parroting, the policymakers, the ministers, the experts, the fatality, then the COVID-19. This time also affecting young, and this time affecting young people and children. The exercise required participants to quick decisions on the basis of incomplete information and uncertainty about the future. Shall we compare them with all these narratives, event 201 and catastrophe contagion? I thought, can we compare it with Valmiki, the sage who wrote the Ramayana before the events unfolded? If those who know about Ramayana, it was written by Valmiki before the Ramayana took place, and then the Ramayana. So this, I think, modern day again we are seeing such miracles. Event 201 had the script ready before the start of the pandemic. Is the script then of the next pandemic title catastrophic contagion ready to? But real life situations more often than not turn out to be a lot different than imagined by armchair generals and doctors. I call these people laptop epidemiologists, like armchair generals. The counterpart in public health is laptop, and now they do models, mouse click, they model that. They fight pandemic on the laptop by projecting millions of deaths, and then they will say ki they have intervened by whatever clumsy measures and they have averted the deaths. Like they said, the vaccine prevented 50 million deaths or something like that. Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman coined the term thinking fast and slow. He died recently, I think, few months ago. Thinking fast is intuitive and effortless, while thinking slow is deliberate and calls for effort. The COVID-19 pandemic sharply illustrated the immense harm of intuitive thinking, fast thinking. In thinking fast, due to impact on the psychology of populations, panic and chaos, and key decision makers as a result of simulation exercise like Event 201, Catastrophic Contagion, or popular movies like Contagion. They appeal to propaganda, they appeal to the emotions. Even movies, they have to raise the thrill level. They have to make it a thriller. Real life is not that yet. And we took so many measures based on this desktop exercises by amateurs, catastrophic contagion, event 201, and psyched by movie contagion. Each battle and each pandemic is different from previous ones, just as one game of chess is different from the other, even when the pieces are the same. Both wars and pandemics are serious business for real professionals and call for deliberate and slow thinking that possesses the unique features as it evolves. That is why armchair generals and tabletop health experts should perhaps limit themselves to script writing for popular movies. So this column is very relevant now because for the time being, the pandemic treaty has been stalled, but as events are unfolding, very few people are raising the voice, particularly the elected reps. Few MPs raised in UK, like Andrew Bridgen, they lost the election. So a lot of people have a skin in the game, including politicians, pharma, scientists also. Scientists have got a lot of scope for getting huge grants for during pandemic. And it is for sincere scientists and enlightened citizens to keep asking the elective representative on what is happening.